Kyle for a while. This is your host, Kyle Willey. This might just be like a brief rambling session. Not really sure what direction I want to take this podcast because it's pretty open. It's just things that I want to talk about. And I think it might be best just to do a get to know me kind of thing. Um, I grew up poor. Which most people can relate, but I thought that I was middle class, where, most likely wasn't. I frequented yard sales, collected toys, had access to a camcorder that I made like little music videos on when I was a kid. Then I was one of the first people in my neighborhood to get a computer. Just by luck, rummaging for, stuff at yard sales, come across parts, a monitor here, a tower there, that kind of thing. So I had access to a lot of technology to make music on, early music making software that I bootlegged off the internet. Access to the internet at an age, when I was really young and the internet was just starting to take off. Of course, this was the dial-up days. And I always just had a fascination with going to yard sales and finding toys from the 1970s, like Shogun Warriors, or the 80s with the He-Man series, or Thundercats, or some of those cartoons that were on. And I also had an interest late at night on TV shows that they would show later in the evening that were older shows. I had like a big, well, I say big, but it was big at the time. It was one of those floor model TVs. It was a 20-inch. I had found it at a yard sale. It was an old Zenith, I think. I would stay up and watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Twilight Zone. Bewitched was probably one of my favorite shows growing up, which nobody at school my age was watching Bewitched. I think Elizabeth Montgomery was probably my first crush. So, because of watching some of this, I don't know, early TV and access to like a rental store with like 50 cent like rentals for like back, catalog VHS tapes. I was watching lots of B horror, and I was watching lots of art films, and it kind of blossomed from there to like love for Akira Kurosawa or Fellini or anybody like this. And I grew up in a family where comic books were the norm. I think my stepdad had a good at least 60,000 comics in my early childhood, definitely more now. I know I've had well over that amount, maybe 5, 6 times that amount. But I've always collected, whether it be books, vinyl records, comic books, art supplies, music equipment. I'm sitting in a studio of collected gear, video equipment, lighting equipment. Just anytime I get a chance to collect something that I really enjoy, I think it comes from that, mind frame of being poor. When I was young, I didn't really have money to afford the things that I really liked. When I had a Nintendo, and all my friends had a Nintendo, my friends had all the popular, really cool games. I had Mario 1, which came with the system. So, I guess I had one popular game. Had a few comic book games because my stepdad bought them and would play them with me. But, for the most part, they were all budget bin games, like games no one had ever heard of. A game called Journey to Silius. Journey to Silius was probably my favorite game growing up. It was supposed to be the Terminator movie franchise video game, but they lost the licensing rights, changed the story around, and they made, that out of it as a platform jumper. Had a game called Kabuki Quantum Fighter I really liked to play. I learned how to play chess on an NES game called Battle Chess. Still like to play chess because of that game. Um, my mom used to play records and 8 tracks for me when I was young of bands that she liked, and we would dance. And I got an early fascination for music. Um, One of the earliest things I ever remember hearing was a 8 track by Tom T. Hall. It was a song called Sneaky Snake, the snake that drank root beer. Didn't really make any sense. Not even sure why we owned it. I don't even think my mom liked that song. Maybe she just thought that I would enjoy it, or we got it at a yard sale or something. I'm not sure where it came from. But when I started getting money of my own and I had a job, um, one of my first jobs was working at a movie theater and in a comic book store. I started acquiring uh, comics, records, movies, VHS. Eventually started working at a Blockbuster. I would buy a lot of their clearance off VHS rentals. I would go to comic book conventions and buy bootleg uh, VHSs that people had dubbed copies of like Italian horror films. I think I started going to the drive-in and was involved with drive-in culture from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old. I think the first movie I ever saw in the drive-in was Hellraiser 1 with it was a double feature. I think the other film might have been Pet Cemetery. There's a local horror host, Sammy Terry, here in Indiana. Watched a lot of his things that he showed, and a lot of made-for-TV horror movies or horror movies that they would play on TV. First horror movie I ever remember seeing was a film called Thirst. It was about vampires bottling blood in like milk cartons or something. It was just ridiculous. Um, Growing up, I had a fascination for Mystery Science Theater 3000. I think I've seen every episode but the lost ones. There's a few lost ones from season 0 when they were, public access. Um, I enjoy mixtapes of public access material or old television commercials. Anything that's kind of like kitsch or just kind of odd. Um, Old like supply catalogs for antiques and old Polish posters, old Russian art, um, 1970s and back. Um, Definitely concert poster art. Um, Avid vinyl collector. Aspiring musician, which I've been an aspiring musician since the age of 14. Is probably when I first started recording my, completed songs. I think 2006 was when I did my first completed album. I played in a band called Rogue for several years. We were in some magazines in England. We had some reviews by Thurston Moore, Sonic Youth, Byron Coley, their biographer. Um, there were several other run-ins with prominent bands like the Cocteau Twins or Death in June. Um, my guitarist, who's my best friend, passed away, and he was the other member of my band. So that disbanded, and I didn't make music for a while. When I started making music again, it was under the name Apology, and that's what all my side projects were. And I remember just the talks of even being in a band in the first place with my friend. His name was Adam. I told him that I did all these songs, but I never completed any albums. And he said, "Well, you have a computer, you've got an auxiliary plug-in, you've got a microphone, you've got amps, we've got a bass, we've got a guitar, we can do vocals. There's no reason we couldn't record, something now." And of course, this was at a time when I was younger, before I had kids and responsibilities and stuff. And my house was kind of like the commune for all kinds of bands to play concerts. I ran my garage as a venue. There were always people there to help out with the recording process or help mix things or teach me things that I didn't know about Photoshop and how to do cover art. And it was, there were always drugs. We're always watching TV shows and movies. I think at the time we were watching Twin Peaks, and the music of Angelo Badalamenti kind of stood out to me. And I was like, we should record something like this, but a little bit more metal. So we did this instrumental doom drone project that was guitar, bass, trombone, no vocals, except for on like one album. Um, it was fun to do. Um, we weren't aware that there were other people doing that kind of music at the time. We were unaware of the kind of subgenre we were getting into at a time when that subgenre was taking off. We traveled up near the Canadian border, up north of Detroit, which is probably about 2.5. Well, what am I talking about? It's probably like 4 hours away from our house to play our first show. So we didn't even play our first show in our hometown. We played our first show elsewhere because with the internet, it was easy to get our music out there. We had 3 albums floating around at the time. Um, there was a really, and still is a really good platform for finding music called SoulSeek. People would download our music, and a lot of people in Michigan became fans of our music pretty quickly. And it seemed to be a good scene. So we played our first concert in Royal Oak, Michigan. But I'm rambling a little bit about the band thing. My point, I guess, is that I'm a pretty obsessive person about a lot of different things, whether it be literature, because I love to read, comic books, because I have an appreciation for um, the style of art and the type of literature that can come across in those. It's a little bit different than a novel. Um, Music, appreciation for vinyl, appreciation for making music, appreciation for those who do make music, art. Currently, I'm a student at the school where I study visual communications. I was an anthropology major for 4 years before that. Um, I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, still want to, make films and score for them. Um, I used to make a living with booths at antique malls and selling things on eBay, like old vintage toys and comic books, and owned my own record store for a while. Um, I've done a few podcasts, not so much video, couple, usually interview type podcasts, not like a straightforward kind of thing like this. Got a huge love for stand-up comedians. My favorite stand-up comedian of all time is probably Norm Macdonald. Um, Probably a cliche thing to say. I grew up watching David Letterman. Um, I think every night my family, we always watched David Letterman, and to me, he was always the funniest, and I admire him greatly to this day. Met Bill Burr before. I used to work third shift at a hotel. Um, Came and stayed at our hotel. Saw him over the period of a few days. At the time, he was one of my favorite comedians as well, still is. Um, Despite things recently, I still have an admiration for Louis C.K. Of course, respect the greats like Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce and Bill Hicks and all these people. Um, some people I consider newer comedians like John Mulaney, even though he's maybe not as new, but definitely have a respect for stand up um, and comedy in general if it's done well. I'm not particularly a fan of modern cinema, with a few exceptions here and there. If it's directed really, really well, or it kind of fits, you know, to where it evokes some kind of emotion in me. But for the most part, I'll see some comic book movies for fun and the nostalgia for the comic book characters. Um, I'll probably see, the top 10, 15 movies of the year that are, uh, you know, recommended by other film buffs as being, having some kind of artistic merit. Um, some of the worst and most terrible horror movies I might catch too, just for a laugh. But I spend most of my time watching older cinema and, things I haven't got around to yet, from the birth of cinema to like 1975, 1985, with horror movies that go a little bit further into the modern, because 80s horror is so cheesy. Same thing with action films. I might go a little bit later with those. Um, I don't know. It's really kind of hard to put all my interests and kind of explain, what I'm into. Um, but I do feel like that's an important thing moving forward with this channel, is to see how well rounded it might be. Definitely a vintage gamer. One of my favorite games of all time is Tetris. Um, You'll probably hear me talk in great detail about Tetris. Even its backstory amazes me. Quite possibly the best game ever made. Um, I think when I grew up, I didn't quite fit into the social structure that was at my school. I went to a school in the middle of nowhere where there was just nothing, cornfields basically, where people took their prom dates to school on tractors and that kind of thing. I was a little bit of a goth kid. Um, my music taste was punk and metal, pretty much growing up. You'd usually catch me in all black. Wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. You might also catch me in, plaid pants and a Dead Kennedy shirt too. It just really depended on the day. My school really wasn't supportive of that. I spent most of my time rebelling against school. Dropped out in the 10th grade, got my GED, went to trade school for computers before I went to college for anthropology. I was an IT technician for years, worked at Best Buy, Circuit City, repaired computers, sold digital cameras. I probably learned more on my own than I ever did in school, primarily about, video, photography, how cameras work, how music equipment works, software, programs. Um, when I was in trade school, we built computers for nonprofit organizations to give to school kids that couldn't afford them. I've probably built over 10,000 computers by hand, um, and done tons of operating system install, fixed computers on the side at home. Um, I've always been technological. I think the both the very first computer I got and the very first Nintendo I got, I took them apart to see how they worked and then put them back together. And then they still work, trying to understand, what components were in there. I remember being surprised when I would open up the Nintendo how little was in that box to make it do what it did. That always fascinated me. Same thing with the controllers and things like that. Um, I'm just a generally curious person, I think, and narcissistic. Probably why I'm spending this whole first episode talking about myself. I'm trying not to use a ton of visual representations because I'd like this to be an audio podcast as well as video for those that want to see me talk and for those that want to listen. Um, I have things I could grab from all around this room or the room next to me. Um, and those might be things I show in future episodes when I've got more to say about them. Um, I think one thing I'd like to mention is that I think a lot of people watch Akira Kurosawa films for like the samurai aspect, but I'm a big fan of his dramas. And one of his favorite dramas to me is One Wonderful Sunday. And what's so great about One Wonderful Sunday is it's a couple who are poor. They don't have any money to get married or to even live with each other. They have to work all the time. They barely get a chance to see each other. When they do, the guy wants it to be really, really special, and the girl just wants to see the guy. So the guy's bummed that they don't have any money. Um, the girl, says, "Don't let that bother you." Eventually, after a bunch of misfortune and mishaps and just, money not being able to be there to, go have any fun, they go do things that are free and they have more fun doing the things that are free than the things that cost money, um, and end up having a wonderful Sunday being broke. Um, to me, that's a very romantic idea. I identify with things like that, the no budget aesthetic of a date, or the no budget aesthetic of making music, really lo-fi attic recordings done on like one mic setup, things that aren't as elaborate as using all of these instruments that I have behind me. I've got a bank of 3 synthesizers here, another synthesizer, um, MIDI controllers, drum machines, mixing boards and stuff over here. It's like you don't need to have all of that to make a song. I think the very first song I ever recorded was a punk song, and it was on my friend's sister's Barbie radio that had like a microphone on it. And we had our cassette demos in, music stores, and we're getting, trying to get gigs based off of that and printing out posters, promotional posters, and things like that. And our music got out there a little bit to some people, maybe not as much as, it could have had it happened a little bit later after the internet was a little bit more ready for, music sharing. Um, the early days of dial-up were pretty cool because the music laws weren't cracked down as much, and you could go to sites like Audio Galaxy and you could download MP3s that were uploaded, find out about new bands. And when you went to the record store, you could buy those albums, and they were usually bands you'd never heard of. I was introduced very early to Fetus and other J.G. Thirlwell Fetus projects. I was introduced to the grind metal band Dystopia. Um, a large majority of the punk rock I found out about were local skateboarders that told me about Dead Kennedys, Bad Religion, the Misfits, things like that. I got really into Sisters of Mercy, Zymox or Clan of Zymox. Um, a lot of goth music that was from overseas, black metal like Mayhem. Um, I mean, you name it. And I was never fond of country because I grew up in the country, and a lot of people listen to Alan Jackson and Tim McGraw and stuff like that. It wasn't until a little bit later that I started to discover, Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings and people like this. So I have a love for, pretty much every genre of music. I've got, some bands that I like. I enjoy rap a lot. Probably cliche to say, but huge Wu-Tang Clan fan. Um, there's some others. Um, I'm talking to you on January 1st of 2020, and 2019. My favorite rap record was probably Tyler the Creator's Igor. Um, just a really good album that tells a really interesting story. Um, I just can't think of anything in that arena that beats that album for the year. I really, really like the new Danny Brown album. It was very short. It's my problem with that. And I feel like it was lacking in that length, that if it would have been perfected a little bit more, had a few more songs on it, maybe a couple more songs that were a little bit more catchy, it probably would have been a lot higher up there. Um, I grew up in the 90s, so I still have an appreciation for a lot of 90s rap. Bone Thugs and Harmony's 1999 Eternal is probably one of my favorite rap albums of all time. Ice Cube, of course. Um, I don't know, there's so much. I enjoy things on the outskirts, like, LP's Fantastic Damage, MF Doom, even more underground than that, I'm sure. And then, some more mainstream things. Growing up, I think my favorite album that was rap was probably Bone Thugs and Harmony's 1999 Eternal. Still listen to that quite a bit. For Record Store Day, I think a year or so ago, they released it on vinyl for the first time since its original release. Um, Looking forward to tracking that down sometime soon. I think I'm finally going to buy it, but it price tags for about $100, so to me, it's worth it. Um, I've got 2 kids. I've got an 11-year-old and a 3-year-old. So a little bit of a gap there. The 11-year-old is getting into art. Manga style probably is the best way to, talk about her art style. She uses Photoshop and a bamboo tablet, and she buys, Copic markers and, professional grade artist, tools, and is really wanting to pursue art. So I'm glad she enjoys that. She's made music with me in the past. Mostly it's like her vocals and me making some beats or, arranging some music. But I try to incorporate my kids in some of the things that I do, and you might see them in some of the video versions of these podcasts. My ultimate goal right now is once I finish school and I graduate and I have my VisCom degree to start teaching at a college level. That's the goal, and I'm working with some people I know currently to try to, make it to that goal, which seems like a good likelihood, and that makes me really happy. I don't have any illusions or delusions, I guess, that I'll ever become famous from doing the music that I do. I'll continue to make it, but, that's because I enjoy it. It's more for me at this point. But I would like to impart some of the things I've learned over the course of my life to other people. Um, Sitting at a computer and video editing short films for hours and then scoring them, um, learning from your mistakes, doing web series, just things that I've done have given me a lot of patience that I don't think a lot of people have. And I don't always strive for a perfect product. I'm sure this podcast video will, you know, show that. I mean, I could have a 2-camera setup and, do elaborate, switching from one camera to another, having the film footage match up, having lots more images on the sides of my head or some green screening or, any of these things. But I want to keep this really simple for now at least. And the main reason is because I want it to be fun for me and hopefully entertaining for you. I just want to be able to set my camera up, which has its own built-in microphones. I'm using a Q2N 4K Zoom video recorder to do this video. I feel like that way I don't have to drag out my microphones, get my mixing board involved. I can keep it simple and I can set up pretty quick. I've got 2 light lamps back behind me with some umbrellas. So I feel like that's enough. We'll see how it goes. Um, I don't really know where else to go to really talk about why I'm doing this podcast. It's just that, I don't know, probably the narcissist in me where I'm just like, I'm interested in so many things. There's so many things to talk about. I've been encouraged by several people just to talk about things that I enjoy. So I'll leave it at that. That's probably good for the first episode. Next episode, I'll probably come back to talk about something specific, and it'll probably stay pretty specific from then on. I've set up a Patreon if you're a fan of what you've seen and you'd like to see more, maybe like to see the quality increase, then definitely do what you can there. If not, I understand. Like I said, I grew up poor. I trade for most of the things I have now. I hardly buy anything new. And if I do, it's with money I got from selling something else or swapping or wheeling and dealing, doing some kind of trade. So I definitely understand if you can't donate, but if you can, it is much appreciated and it will probably up the quality of this channel, the kinds of content you see. Leave below in the messages anything that maybe I've touched on that you would like me to elaborate on for further episodes, whether it be stand-up, comics, vinyl, anything like that. Maybe even specific gear that I have that I like to use. Um, really anything's fair game. Just go below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll try to put out a video as often as possible. I'm not really sure what the schedule will be, and I am a full-time student, um, and I'll have a really full load this semester. I will try to have at least 3 hours worth of material a month is what I'm shooting for, um, whether that be weekly or just a really long one each month. I'm not really with different segments. I'm not really sure how the formatting is going to go, but yeah, I have lots to talk about. This episode's been unscripted and kind of off the top of my head, so forgive me for that. Forgive me for rambling and forgetting a lot of the things that I learned in speech class, like not to say and like all the time, because I feel like I've done that. And if you have any questions, just ask them. I'll link below to my website. You can see some of the music that I do there, some art, some short films, other videos, links there to my Bandcamp and downloads for pretty much anything I've ever done, within reason. That I still have some kind of pride for. Just keep checking back with me. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Your host, Kyle Willey, signing